Okay, so this Gemara is probably the hardest Gemara in Shas. Both, I think, both Bavli and Yerushalmi. So it's a Gemara about the International Dateline. So it's a very short Gemara, but a very cryptic Gemara. And the Gemara starts almost at the top. Amar Shmuel. You see, like the fifth or sixth word. Amar Shmuel. Yechilna. So, tomorrow Rosh Hashanah, of course, is Daf Chaf Beis, is talking about various different aspects of Rosh Hashanah, and this also is an aspect of Rosh Hashanah. But first Shmuel starts with what seems to be a boast. I can make a calendar for the entire Gola, which includes all aspects of astronomy. Shmuel was a big astronomer. He said, "Shvili in the hearing Shvili the Rakia, Shvili the Narada." He said if he had a clarity as to the heavens, just like he had a clarity as to pathways of the town of Narada. So he also said, "I can fix the entire Gola with a calendar which is, I guess, perpetual and accurate." Amalei Abba Avud Rabbi Simloi l'Shmuel. So Abba Avud Rabbi Simloi said to Shmuel, Yodamar Hai Milsa, the Tani Besoda Iber. Do you know that which it says in Soda Iber? Soda Iber, we assume, is a brisa, which has the discussion of the details in making the Jewish calendar. Nolad Kodem Chatzos and Nolad Achar Chatzos. That it makes a difference whether the Molad is before Chatzos and the Molad is after Chatzos. Amalei said, Lo. I don't know. Amar Le, so he said, Midchol lo yadamar, since you don't know this. Ikamil Achroni said lo yadamar. There are other things you don't know. So don't be so proud of yourself. You actually don't know all there is to know about the topic of the calendar. Kisalik Rabbi Zera, Shachlu. Now, we assume that this is a continuation of this discussion. Rabbi Zera went up to Eretz Yisrael. As you know, Rabbi Zera went up to Eretz Yisrael. Gemara Ksuva says that he had to hide the fact from his Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda said he's not allowed to leave Bavel and go up to Eretz Yisrael, but he went up anyway, and as the Gemara which says that he fasted 40 Tanesim in order to forget all his learning of Chutz La'aretz, whatever that means. He didn't actually forget his learning, but I guess in order to acquire the new derech in Eretz Yisrael. And when he came there, so sent back a message to Bavel. You need a night and a day from the new month or the new year in this case. That's what Abba Avud Rabbi Simloi, who was the person who just rebuked Shmuel on top, said. We reckon it's Moilad. No Kodem Chatzos, that the Moilad takes place before Chatzos. Then you know that it was seen adjacent near the Shkia. The moon was seen, and what that means, again, we have to discuss. Lo Chatzos, if the moon was not seen before Chatzos. I'm sorry, the Moilad did not occur before Chatzos. That's when we know that the moon was not seen near the time Shkia Sachama. What's the difference? I said, if witnesses come and say they saw the moon, we know they're lying if they say if the Moilad was after Chatzos, and they said they saw the moon at Shkia Sachama. Okay? Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera said further, Rav Nachman, as Tim Barba showing Michse Sahar, for 24 hours the moon is hidden. Lididon Shis Me'atika, for us it's 6 hours from the old moon. The Timnei Yisrael Mechadata, and 18 hours from the new moon. Lididhu, according for them, it's Shis Mechadata, 6 hours from the new moon. The Timnei Yisrael Me'atika, and 18 hours from the new moon. So, again, what's an Afkamina? Rashi said, Lachushe Sadeh, again, to contradict the witnesses. Amar Mar, that which you said need a day and a night and a day from the new moon. What does that mean? I'm sorry, where does it come from? Erev ad Erev. From nightfall to nightfall, it reads 24 hours. Ad Yom Ha'echad V'esrim B'chodesh Ba'erev. So evidently, he's learning from this other pasuk the same idea. My Beinayu, what's the difference? Abaye Amar Mashmos Darsh Ika Beinayu. Abaye said the difference is how to derive the same idea. Rav Chatzos Laila Ika Beinayu. Rav said that the Chatzos, the midnight, is the difference. How to determine when? How? I'm not sure what exactly. I don't recall what Rava said about that. But the pshat is in Rava. But Rashi probably says, if we look in Rashi, um, Rashi doesn't automatically come up for me on the computer. Alright, let's leave that alone because it's complicated and it's not going to be relevant to us for today's discussion. Now the question is, what does this Gemara mean? The most basic problem in this Gemara is that the Gemara seems to say that Holon v'holahu, which normally means Bavel and Eretz Yisrael, depending on who's where, that for one, it's the new moon disappears for 6 hours. It's either 6 and 18. For one of us, it's 6 hours of the old moon and 18 hours of the new moon, and for the other one, it's 18 hours of the new moon and 6 hours of the 8 hours of the old moon and 6 hours of the new moon. So there's not that much difference between Bavel and Eretz Yisrael in terms of distance. So therefore, how could there be such a dramatic 12-hour difference in terms of how much you see of the moon on Rosh Chodesh? It should be only a difference of a few minutes. So how does it come to be a 12-hour difference? That's the key cryptic point in this entire sugya. The other issue is, what does it mean shiur yom v'layla min hachodesh? What are we talking about? The assumption is talking about Rosh Hashanah. But what does it mean a day and a night? How do you get a day and night from the chodah, from the new moon, if the moilad is in the middle of Chatzois? Makes no sense. In the middle of Chatzois, you certainly don't have a day and a night of the new moon. Sorry? So what do you know what the moilad is?
When it goes away.
No. The moilad is a hypothetical point. It's really a point which we can't see the moon. And on Rosh Chodesh, you have the sun, the earth, and in between them is the moon, right? So you can't see the moon because all of the light of the sun is hitting the back of the moon. But we can't see any of it because it's a precise line between us and the sun. The molad is the moment that moves off that precise correspondence. And that moment is called the moment because it's the new moon is born, but you can't see it yet. The light from the moon is too dim. Obviously, it's only a tiny, tiny sliver of light. So usually it takes 24 hours to see the moon. That's it says Chavdal Shamich Sierra. But in rare instances, the moon can be seen 6 hours later. Now, a lot has to do with what time of day the molad occurs. Right? The molad molad occurs. When we call the molad in shul, we say it happens at Jerusalem Standard Time, but that's almost meaningless, because you don't know where Yerushalayim is in its cycle around the earth at the time that the molad is occurring. It doesn't mean they see the molad in Yerushalayim at that point in time, but rather somewhere, and no, we actually see it at that point. But Yerushalayim might be, let's say, if this is the sun is here and the earth is here and the moon is in the middle, Yerushalayim might be facing that way. Yerushalayim might be facing that way. Yerushalayim might be facing this way. Yerushalayim might be facing at the moon, right? It could be that Yerushalayim is daytime, if it's facing the moon and facing the sun. Could be Yerushalayim it's nighttime, when Yerushalayim is facing away from the sun and towards outwards, so to speak. So therefore, that moment is purely a moment in an astronomical time, which doesn't necessarily have anything to do with Yerushalayim per se. Just that for our purposes, Yerushalayim is the center of the world, so therefore we use time in Yerushalayim. But it doesn't mean it's going to be visible in Yerushalayim or at that point in time, or 6 hours later. It all depends where Yerushalayim is in its own rotation cycle at that point. So therefore, at a minimum, it takes 6 hours for the moon to be seen after the molad. But again, that depends where you are, whether it's nighttime, whether it's daytime, and the precise angle, therefore, which you have towards the moon. So generally, it's said that it's hard to perceive it until 24 hours after the moon is after molad, and it's also hard to see the moon during the last 24 hours before the molad. So that's what the Rambam says. It's really 48 hours. Again, it's possible that it's as little as 12, 6 hours on each side. It's usually up to 48. Okay, so the moilad occurring before or after Chatzos seems to have nothing to do with the visibility of the moon. So the question is why that makes a difference, and how that makes Yom V'Layla Min HaChodesh if it's talking about midday, somewhere on Earth. So far, so good. Is that clear? Any questions so far?
Mostly, yeah.
What?
Mostly, yeah.
Mostly? What's not clear?
Yom Laila Min HaChabad.
We haven't explained it yet. Okay? Now, there's Rashi and Tosfos on this page. Rashi and Tosfos are very cryptic. I've never understood Rashi or Tosfos. But there is a Rishon called Kuzari who discusses this Gemara. And the Baal Mor in the back of the Gemara also discusses this Gemara. And they both say the same thing. The Kuzari is famous for his machshava, for the what?
The Kuzar.
Right, the debate between the conversation between Rabbi Yitzchak and the king of the Khazars. But in the course of the Kuzari, there are several halachic issues which come up. Rav Zevin in his Lor Halacha has a whole essay about the halachic ramifications of the Kuzari, and one of them is the idea of Tzarech Shel Yom V'Layla Min HaChodesh. And he explains this. He says, if you take a look at Earth as a globe, that was important. Of course, Chazal knew that the Earth was a globe. Everybody knew the Earth was a globe. The only ones who didn't know that were the early Christians. But everybody else knew throughout history that the world was round. So in fact, there's a Gemara which says, Medrash says, that Alexander the Great went up in a balloon and actually saw the curvature of the Earth. So obviously they knew that the Earth was curved. There's a Gemara in Avodah Zarah which says that there's an Avodah Zarah which is like a ball, and the Yerushalmi says that Avodah Zarah is shaped like a ball because it's the shape of the Earth. So everybody knew that the Earth was round. So now, if you assume that the Earth was round, so then you have an interesting question. There must be somewhere on Earth a dateline. Can you give me the globe, please?
Did you bring that?
Yes. I didn't inflate it all the way. I knew it was necessary. Now, I think we get the idea, even if it's all the way. Now, in order to...
just get rid of Africa or something.
Yeah. This is something which is hard to understand because we normally don't, even though we know the world is round. By the way, I'm trying to record this, so I'm going to see if I can get this and angle on this. Even though we know that the Earth is round, we don't really think of it as being round. But there must be somewhere on Earth where if we step one way, it's going to be Monday. If we step back the other way, it's going to be Tuesday.
In the middle of the night?
No. And ever we do it. So let's take an example. Right now we are here. Okay, we are on the eastern seaboard of the United States, and we're going to make the international dateline go right through Monroe, New York. Okay, we're right here, approximately in New York. Okay, New York. What time is it now? 11:30. Okay, so now we're traveling instantaneously around the world. Right now it's 11:30 here in New York. We go back. What time is it in Los Angeles right now? 8:30 in the morning. Right. What time is it now in? So now let's take large areas. They're 24 hours, right? So if we go 6 hours away, which is a quarter way around the globe, what time is it there? Right now.
5:30.
5:30 in the morning, right? If we go another 6 hours further, what time is it there?
11:30.
11:30, right? But at some point, since we're going backwards in time, we just went past midnight, and therefore we went back a day according to the secular calendar, right? That's right.
Yeah.
Right. So therefore we went back into
Yesterday.
Wednesday. Okay. We go back. We go another 6 hours.
5:30.
So 5 in the afternoon on Wednesday, right? We come back here 1 inch away from us, right? Let's say the dateline passes right here. So now, at what time is it over here?
It's 11:30 around.
But 11:30 when?
Yesterday.
Yesterday.
Oh,
And if I take one more step to the west, I go into
Today.
today.
It doesn't make sense.
But does it make sense? I just proved it to you.
You can't just go.
There has to be someplace on Earth like that.
Yeah.
Okay, you can put wherever you want, but there's got to be, because the world is round, there's got to be a place where you go from one day to the next day, or one day back a day. And again, if I made it go through, if I wanted to make it go right here, I could go right here. What happened in the 1880s that they had a big convention in Greenwich, in England, and they decided they're going to make Greenwich, the astronomers, the center of the universe, the center of the world. So they decided, okay, if Greenwich is the center of the world, so therefore, Greenwich is the prime meridian, 0 degrees longitude. It goes over here, right? So therefore, the world should extend 180 degrees on either side. And therefore, the international dateline should be on the opposite side of the world. And it should be 180 degrees on each side to the international dateline from Greenwich. Okay, so therefore they put the international dateline in the middle of the Pacific. That was convenient for other reasons, because nobody lives in the Pacific, right? So therefore, and they made it zigzag around land masses. So therefore, it wouldn't be as much trouble as it would be if it was in a heavily populated area. But if you you can put the international dateline anywhere you want it. But there has to be a place on Earth where the day changes from Monday to Tuesday in one way, from Tuesday to Monday going the other way. So now when it's over here, let's give the example here, the international dateline where it is, right? In other words, when you go over the dateline from east to west, you're going to go a day ahead. When you go to the line from west to east, which was the example which we, the example we gave before, you're going to go back a day.
Shouldn't that work both ways? If I'm over here and I go forward, so it's an hour later, right? And 6 hours later, so then this is the next day right before I get to it.
The question is where you're going to.
Do you go backwards or forwards?
This has to be, if you're going, it's always going to be that if you go west, you're going to go forwards. If you're going to go east, you're going to go backwards. Figure it out. Take any spot on the globe and just try the same thing.
So then, if I go east, then I should be going forwards. How do I go backwards?
No, if you're east, you're going backwards. Because the way you look at it is that always, it's earlier where the sun is not yet risen yet. Right? So therefore, since the sun, right now the sun is overhead, more or less here in Monroe. But it's still much lower down in the sky in Los Angeles, right? And it's just rising, to the side around in Hawaii. So that's got to be, from our perspective, earlier. It has to get earlier and earlier and earlier to the point where it can't get earlier anymore.
But if you look at it the other way, so then
Which the other way?
We're looking at, maybe we're turned around, but
No, maybe you have to go the other way.
So if you're going to Maine and stuff, so it should be later over there.
That's correct.
Right? But it's really earlier.
No, it can't be earlier because the sun is higher up in the sky.
No, if we say the international dateline is over here, right? So
Yes.
it should be later over there, but it's really yesterday.
Oh,
So
yes,
it's not.
that's true. But
So
that's because there must be an international dateline. And we drew it through Monroe. But if we drew it through in the Pacific, then it'd be later there on the same day. Because the place where you pass over is not in Maine, but a place that's going to be in the Pacific.
Yeah.
It's a very hard concept to come out to understand, which is pretty remarkable considering that we've known from the earliest age that the world is round. But it's so hard to relate to. It took me a long time to understand that actually there must be an international dateline somewhere on Earth. That's the hardest part to conceive. Do you understand that somewhat?
I think so.
Okay, so there has to be the line has to be somewhere on Earth. So the question is where it is. Now this is a major nafkamina in halacha, because it means if you pass on Friday from the east to the west, you're passing into Shabbos. If you pass on Sunday from the west to the east, you're passing into Shabbos. There's also Sphira. There are many other nafkaminas, right? So the question is, where does this line exist on Earth according to halacha, if it does exist?
Yerushalayim's over here, sun's over here.
So you're right. So this is a major machlokes between the poskim, which came up as a contemporary issue halach lamaisa during the Second World War. It really wasn't so much lamaisa before the Second World War because people rarely found themselves in areas in which there was a halachic question. But in the Second World War, at the beginning of the war, the Mir Yeshiva Bachrim fled from Mir, and they ended up in. No, that was later. First, they ended up in Japan. And Japan is a big shiloh, what its status is. And Shabbos, since they kept 2 days Shabbos, because they weren't sure which day was really Shabbos, but Yom Kippur was coming close. And they didn't, it's not so simple to fast 2 days Yom Kippur. So therefore they sent the Shaila to Eretz Yisrael, to the Gedolim in Eretz Yisrael at the time. It was before Japan was at war with Great Britain, so they could still communicate directly. And the question they asked is, what day should we fast? Yom Kippur in Japan was supposed to be on Wednesday. Should they fast on Wednesday, or should they fast on Thursday the following day? And we'll explain how that works in a few moments. So there was one group of Gedolim got together in Yerushalayim, And then there was the Chazon Ish. The group of Gedolim Yerushalayim said fast on Wednesday, the day of Yom Kippur, according to the Japanese Jewish calendar. The Chazon Ish said, famous four-word telegram, Ichlu b'Revi v'tzumu b'Chamishi. Eat on Wednesday and fast on Thursday. Now, most of the Mir Yeshiva whoever was able to get out before Yom Kippur left to Shanghai before Yom Kippur, because they didn't want to have the Shaila. And on the mainland, it's much less of a Shaila, if it is at all. But those who were left in Japan, for the most part, they followed the Psak of the Chazon Ish. The Mir Mashgiach, Reb Chatzko Levenstein, told them they should follow the Psak of the Chazon Ish, and the few of them fasted for both days. So, but that became, since then, this has been a major issue in Judaism. This issue of international dateline, it first came up in modern times. Now, the two big antagonists, major antagonists in this battle, are the Chazon Ish on the one side, and the person who made the presentation from the Gedolim Yerushalayim was Reb Yechiel Michal Tukachinsky on the other side, and there's a third shita, the shita of Ritzi Pesach Frank. Now, besides that, there are at least 4 other shitos, but those are the 3 major shitos. Okay, so those 3 shitos discuss where the international dateline is in halacha, and basically it all comes down to the issue of Yerushalayim being the center of the world. But what is the world? Is the world defined, as they did at Greenwich, as being 180 degrees on either side of Yerushalayim, and therefore the international dateline should be 180 degrees away from Yerushalayim, where Rabbi Yechiel Michal Tukachinsky placed it? Or is the world defined as the hemisphere in which Yerushalayim is located? And therefore, if that's the case, we only take into account that hemisphere, and therefore the international dateline halacha would be 90 degrees east of Yerushalayim. Okay? Again, question is, when we look at Yerushalayim as the center, is the center of the totality of the globe, or is the center of its part of the globe? By the way, I'm going to go off on a tangent. In Chabad, there's way off on a tangent, but it's an interesting tangent. Chabad, they hold that the Yerushalayim is the center of its hemisphere, the Chatzi Kador Elyon, the upper hemisphere, and corresponding to that there is a center of the lower hemisphere, the Chatzi Kador Tachton, which is in Crown Heights, right? And just like there was a Beis HaMikdash and a king in the upper hemisphere, there's something akin to the Beis HaMikdash and to the king in the lower hemisphere, which of course is 770 and the Rebbe, and that through most of the world's existence, the tikkun of the world took place in the Chatzi Kador Elyon. Before Mashiach comes, there has to be a tikkun in the Chatzi Kador Tachton, which has not yet been fixed through history. So therefore, the Rebbe had to stay in Crown Heights and be masaking the Chatzi Kador Tachton until such time as there was a simon from Shemayim that the tikkun had been complete, in which case he could then go to Eretz Yisrael and be Mashiach there.
Top and bottom.
What?
What's top and bottom?
Top is the hemisphere which has Yerushalayim, and bottom is the hemisphere which doesn't have Yerushalayim. In other words, if you take Yerushalayim 90 degrees east of Yerushalayim, approximately is China, 90 degrees west of Yerushalayim approximately is the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. That all is one hemisphere. And then everything else is the other hemisphere. Just like we have the eastern and western hemispheres,
Yeah.
so it's a similar idea, but the hemispheres are divided differently. In other words, the center of the upper hemisphere is Yerushalayim, and it extends 90 degrees on either side, because the hemisphere is 180 degrees. The globe is 360 degrees, so the hemisphere is 180 degrees. Okay? So, Chazon Ish said, I have a raya to this opinion of mine, which is that the international dateline is 90 degrees east of Yerushalayim, not 180 degrees, from the Kuzari. Because the Kuzari explains our Gemara. And the Kuzari says, what does it mean, Tzashiyah Malayim in a Chodesh? And what does it mean, the 6 and the 18 hours? The secret of the 18 hours. The Chazon Ish actually called his work on the topic Kuntres Yurches Shos, the pamphlet on 18 hours. So, if the Moilad takes place in Chatzos in Yerushalayim, midday in Yerushalayim, the world, according to Chazon Ish, extends 90 degrees east, but 270 degrees west. because you have to take into account that the world, of course, is 360 degrees. So there, if you put in the date line 90 degrees east of Yerushalayim, then everything else to the west of Yerushalayim is going to be later than Yerushalayim. You see that? So far, so good. So
Like Japan, Korea. What?
all that. Now, if says the Chazon Ish, where do those 18 hours come from? The 12-hour difference and the 18-hour, the 12, 6 and 18 is based on the difference between China and Yerushalayim. How so? So he says, since they're 270 degrees west of Yerushalayim, that equals 18 hours. So if the Moilad takes place in Yerushalayim at noon, right, and the international dateline is 270 degrees west of Yerushalayim, so the 18 hours of the world are going to be behind Yerushalayim. 9 hours are going to be ahead, and 18 hours behind. Do you see that? So therefore, if that's the case, if it's noon at Yerushalayim, now, and you're going to make instantaneous circumnavigation of the globe, so you're going immediately instantaneously 18 hours earlier. What time is it going to be in China? On the just over the east side of the dateline. 6 p.m. When? Which day?
Before.
Friday. If so, now says the Chazon Ish, in this cheshbon of the tzarech yom v'layla min hachodesh, we're using shows kavuos, not shows manios, but fixed hours, and we're assuming shkia is at 6 o'clock, which is what would be on a Nissan day, right? It's an equinox day, a perfect day. 6 o'clock would be shkia. So 6 o'clock would be shkia, a 24-hour day from shkia to shkia. If the Moilad, Tishrei also, which is Tishrei and Yisro are both equinox times, so therefore Rosh Hashanah usually comes out around a time when the day and night are equal. So he says, if the Moilad occurs in Yerushalayim at 12:01 p.m., so it's occurring in China at China. What time is it in China?
11:59. No, not 5.
12:01
12:01.
in Yerushalayim. What time is it in China?
5:59. 6:01.
6:01, right? So and we said that usually it takes 24 hours to see the moon at the time of the Moilad. So that means that if the Moilad occurs at 12:01 in Yerushalayim time, which is 6:01 China time, by the time 24 hours have elapsed, it's going to be the next day, and nobody will have seen the moon on Rosh Chodesh. But if the Moilad occurs 11:59 a.m. in Yerushalayim, by Yerushalayim time, what time is now in China?
5:59.
5:59 p.m. Just before Shkia, the evening before, and therefore by the next day in China, which is the day of Rosh Chodesh, by then you'll be able to see the new moon in China. Some people have seen the new moon somewhere on Earth during that day. So says this is all the Kuzari. So that means tzarech yom v'layla min hachodesh. It means in China you have to have a full day and night from the new moon, in order that somebody on Earth should be able to see it, the new moon on Rosh Chodesh. Now the only time this makes a difference, even though it should make a difference in every Rosh Chodesh, Chazal said it only makes a difference in Rosh Hashanah, because every other people are not that concerned and they're not paying attention that much. But Rosh Hashanah, at the beginning of the year, we're very, very concerned. And therefore, we need to have Yom V'Layla Min HaChodesh in China, that at least in China, somebody should have seen the new moon, and they'll be able to report back to Beis Din in Eretz Yisrael, that they saw the moon on that day, and Beis Din's reckoning is confirmed. Now, that's important to know that the Muslims, at Etzem Hayom Hazeh, still in Mekadesh Al Pi Riyah. Every month they wait for somebody to testify they saw the new moon. They're Mekabel Eidus by telephone, so people call in from wherever they've seen the moon to the Sanhedrin in Riyadh, and the Sanhedrin in Saudi Arabia calls as Mekudesh, and they make the new moon.
Pretty cool.
Yes. But so we don't have that anymore, unfortunately, and we wouldn't rely on Eidos by telephone anyway. So therefore, but it might take a while for the people from China to get there to Israel. Well, we saw the new moon on that day, but it will be confirmed, and therefore, since it will be confirmed, so therefore that they could be Rosh Chodesh, Rosh Hashanah specifically. Now, if it's later than that, if it's as well as after 12 p.m. Rosh Hashanah, so they have to push it off. They can't make it that day because they won't. It's not Yom V'Layla Min HaChodesh in China, and therefore people are not going to see it necessarily on Rosh Hashanah, and then it's going to be Mechzik Shikra. It's going to look like a lie. So therefore, in such circumstances, they push off Rosh Hashanah to the next day. That is called that when the Moed comes out after noon, after high noon in Yerushalayim time. It's called a Molad Zaken, an old Molad, and a Molad Zaken is a reason to push off the Rosh Hashanah, and all of our cheshbonos for how we when we push off Rosh Hashanah. You know how we push off Rosh Hashanah? Cheshvan and Kislev are two months which are variable in length. All of the Jewish months are fixed in length, 29 and 30. Cheshvan and Kislev can be either both 29, when 29 and 30, and one or both 30. Okay, so therefore, it always we look at Rosh Hashanah and see whether it's going to be a Molad Zaken or not from the year before, and that's how we determine how many days Cheshvan and Kislev are going to have, 29 or 30, in order to push off. If we need to push off Rosh Hashanah. Now, there's another issue, which is that Rosh Hashanah cannot come out of which days?
When is that? I don't know.
Lo Adu Rosh, Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday. Why is that?
Doesn't matter.
Then,
What? One of them, two of them do with Shabbos, and one of them do with Sukkot. So one of them have to do with Shabbos, Dalet and Vav, because otherwise Shabbos will either come out the day before or the day after Yom Kippur. And Aleph, Aleph and Vav, because if Rosh Hashanah came out on Sunday or on Friday, then Yom Kippur will come out either before or after Shabbos, and we don't want to have Shabbos, Yom Kippur adjacent to each other. And Wednesday because
Why not?
what?
Why not?
Hoshana Rabbah, because they never want Hoshana Rabbah to come out on a Shabbos, and then Hoshana Rabbah come on Shabbos. I might be wrong about the dates. It might be Wednesday. The three reasons, right?
Why did you make
What?
fast and then have Shabbos? What's the
Yeah, it's a whole problem in halacha. How you deal with that, right? So that's a major problem in halacha. So then it's also a problem. Based Midrash Shayachim is a problem, big problem with the korbanos too. So therefore we push. So therefore lo adu rosh. There are sometimes they have to push Rosh Hashanah 2 days. One day because of Molad Zaken, and another day because it's Wednesday, Sunday, Wednesday, or Friday. So that's why we need 2 variable months in order to be able to push off Rosh Hashanah either by 1 or 2 days or make it earlier by 1 or 2 days. It's interesting that this is a topic for another shiur, but in the year 922, there was a big machlekes between Rabbi Sadi Gaon Bavel and the Rosh Hashiva in Eretz Yisrael, whose name was, I forget his name. I wrote a whole article about him. I don't remember his name. I think his name was Ben Asher. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But in any event, but the way it used to work is that every Hoshana Rabbah, the Rosh Hashiva in Feria, because there was no yeshiva at the time, would go up on Har Zaysim and announce how many days Cheshvan and Kislev would have, because you had to that those is only Cheshvan and Kislev for the variable months. They already had to know for the year before how they're going to work with Rosh Hashanah the following year, and that year. There was the Rosh Hashiva in Eretz Yisrael said he had a Kabbalah that you can be off in a Molad Zaken, and by the way, there are two other cheshbonos which are connected to Molad Zaken, which have to do with which are too complicated to get into right now. But let's just you call them all Molad Zaken for now. So that year, everybody thought that Rosh Hashanah would be pushed off because it was a Molad Zaken year, and he said no. He had a Masorah that you have up to 642 halakim of an hour. About 1,080 halakim in an hour. It's about 35 minutes of leeway, and that you could push off Rosh Hashanah if the Molad happens between 12 p.m. even after 12 p.m. up to 12:35. You don't have to push off Rosh Hashanah that year. And the question where you got that from? That's what I wrote a whole article on. But the point is that that year the Am Yisrael kept 2 different days Pesach, and the following year 2 different days Rosh Hashanah, because the Pesach and said, I have no such Messiah, and therefore he disagreed with Ben Asher. So therefore, again, since you announced as Shana Rabbah, it always makes a difference for Pesach. So they kept 2 different days Pesach and 2 different days Rosh Hashanah. It even out the year afterwards. It always even out eventually because it always has to do with the Moed each year. So therefore, the following year to even out. But that year was a tremendous machlekes in Klal Yisrael, and it made the Karaites very happy because the rabbis were getting themselves in deep trouble. Anyway, be that as it may. So now, getting back to our issue. So therefore, the Kuzari explains this Gemara and the discrepancy of sometimes we can see the moon for 6 hours. They see the moon 6 hours after the mud, but for us it's 18 hours. And sometimes we see the moon 6 hours, they can see the moon 18 hours, based on what's facing light and what's facing darkness when the mullet occurs. All based on this principle that there's a Halachic International Dateline which runs between 18 hours west and 6 hours east of Yerushalayim. That it's right there. And therefore, since that's the case, says the Chazon Ish, I have a Rishon on my side. So therefore, you have to. This is where we paskin. When you have a Rishon who says something, then we paskin like him. Rav Tukachinsky and the other Gedolim held that first of all, it's not. They had a Rishon which was ambiguous, which they seems to say perhaps not like the Kuzari, though it's very ambiguous. The Chazon Ish claims that this Rishon was a very obscure Rishon, actually says like the Kuzari. But they basically said that the Svara of Yerushalayim being in the middle of the universe, middle of the world, dictates that the international dateline should be 108 degrees away from Yerushalayim. And this is important. Basically, the way I was once explained to me by Rabbi Aaron Soloveitchik. Rabbi Aaron Soloveitchik held like Rabbi Tukachinsky. So he held. So he said that we're not mechuyev to take the Kuzari into account in halacha. There are Rishonim who are not top level Rishonim, and we only have to take the top level Rishonim into account in paskin halacha, and the Kuzari is not one of them. And Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank, who was the chief rabbi of Yerushalayim at the time, he went further. He said that anything which is not codified in the Rambam or Shulchan Aruch, we're entitled to do with it as we please. And since we're entitled to do as we please, so therefore it's much more convenient for us to put the Halachic International Dateline where the secular International Dateline is. So we're going to put it right there. So therefore, again, it's a method. There's a very basic methodology of psak issue here. Whenever you have a Rishon, you follow the Rishon, even if he's not, so to speak, from the top tier of Rishonim, as long as he's recognized Rishon. According to the Rav Tukachinsky and the others, no. If you don't have a Rishon from the top tier, so then you go after whatever seems to be the svara of, and in this case, as far as that Yerushalayim is in the middle of the universe. According to the Tzvi Pesach Frank, it's even more radical. If something is not a Rambam and Shulchan Aruch, you can do whatever you want. You know what I mean? And therefore, even it's not convenient to put it 108 degrees east of Yerushalayim either. So therefore, we're going to put it where the international dateline is today. Now, what falls into the category of doubt, according to Chazon Ish, according to the Tukachinsky? So, according to the Chazon Ish,
Can we get the globe?
according to Chazon Ish, in theory, everything 90 degrees of Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim is approximately. Yerushalayim is over here, right? And a quarter of the globe approximately comes over here. It bisects Siberia and also bisects Australia. There's a big problem. Because everybody in Australia lives, all Jews in Australia, perhaps for Chabadniks and other assorted Jews who live on the West Coast, all of them live on the East Coast. The East Coast of, so therefore, if the international dateline, according to Halachic, bisects Australia, and they are yet, that means they're on the east side of the Halachic International Dateline, but they're on the west side of the secular International Dateline. So the day they hold is Shabbos, actually according to Halachic, according to Chazon Ish, should be which day? Friday, because it's a day earlier. And the day they hold is Sunday, should be Shabbos. Now the Brisker Rav held that the international halacha, he was a real brisker. The international halacha goes straight down, no chachmas, right? And therefore, according to Brisker Rav, and there was a great Eli, whose name was Reb Chaim Zimmerman, who wrote a very long and intricate sefer about the international halacha called Gan Asar. So here they hold that people in Australia are sinner Mechali Shabbos every week. If you're a brisker and you live in Australia, you have a big problem because you're going to hell. Because every week they hold it's a wrong side of the Dash like they hold like Chazon Ish, and yet they hold that. Well, they wouldn't admit they hold like the Chazon Ish if they're briskers, but they hold Chazon Ish practically, and yet it's so therefore how are these people going to live in Australia? So the Chazon Ish himself has a svara. Chazon Ish says the international dateline halacha cannot sever a landmass in two. It doesn't make sense. Like it's almost against the Rechad Archinom to say such a thing, right? So it wouldn't give us such a difficult standard of measure that if you cross the line on land in the middle of Shabbos, going back and forth between Shabbos and a weekday. So everybody says any landmass which part of which is in the hemisphere Yerushalayim, it's as if the entire landmass is in that hemisphere. So therefore, the international dateline halacha, even though theoretically it should go down the middle of Siberia,
makes everything easier.
It skirts goes around the landmass, and also in Australia, since part of Australia is in the upper hemisphere, it goes around Australia, which leaves Japan as a problem because Japan is off the coast, right? So therefore, even if it skirts the landmass, it includes Korea, it doesn't include Japan.
It should connect it. You know?
What?
It should connect it.
Should connect it, but they didn't for some reason because Japan and Korea probably don't get along. But anyway, let's come back to a minute. So, but even because Chazon Ish comes up fascinating nafkaminas. For example, if you take off on a plane from Australia on Sunday, you're flying into Shabbos. You see that?
Or you could be on a plane on Shabbos.
You can. You'll be able. Actually, I just got a call yesterday from somebody who was planning on leaving Japan on a Friday and flying back to America. And the question is whether he's actually going to be flying into Shabbos at all. So you can be in a plane on Shabbos, it's true. But during that time which you're on Shabbos, there's several things you cannot do, such as turn on your reading, change the audio visual settings, go to the bathroom, because when you lock the door, the light goes on, and so on and so forth. But yes, it will come and even if you went swimming off the coast of Australia on a beach on Shabbos, you might be on Sunday. You might be going swimming into Shabbos, which would actually be also. So there are also interesting things because it doesn't. How far does it go directly off the landmass? How far into the water do you have to go? When you're in an airplane, we assume it starts meaning you're 10 fachim off the ground, right? So therefore, there are all sorts of issues which are involved. Now, so Japan, as I said, is an issue according to Chazon Ish. Because it's off the landmass, it's well past 90 degrees east of Yerushalayim. But besides that, it's also off the landmass. So it ever comes out in the middle. That's why there was this big issue. What do we do? Now, according to Rav Tukachinsky, it's not a problem, because according to Rav Tukachinsky, it's on the west side of both the International Dateline and the Halachic International Dateline. But according to Rav Tukachinsky, there's not.
Where's his line?
His line goes more or less right here. It bisects Alaska.
Where's Hawaii?
I'm getting to Hawaii.
Oh, okay.
Bisects Alaska, and it goes between the United States mainland and Hawaii. Now, so for Rav Tukachinsky, Nachum Kasher also wrote a book. Lots of people wrote books on the Dateline because it's a fun topic. So Nachum Kasher, in his book called the Kav Tarikh Yisrael, he follows the Tzipetz Frank Shita that we put it where we want. But Nachum Kasher points out that on Rav Tukachinsky's maps of the world, in his book on the topic, Sefer Yomam, he conveniently left Hawaii off the map. So, but Hawaii is a problem. Because Hawaii, according to Chazon Ish, is not a problem because it's both on the east side of the Secular International Dateline and it's on the east side of the Halachic International Dateline. But according to Tukachinsky, it's on the east side of the Secular International Dateline, but it's on the west side of the Halachic International Dateline. So he doesn't deal with Hawaii, but he deals with Alaska. Because Alaska is bisected, according to him. So he wants to say a svara about Alaska, that since, and we know now this is not true, but I don't think he knew this. He said it must be the first settlers in Alaska came from
Siberia.
No, that's what we know now. But he says they must have come from North America. And therefore they brought Shabbos with them when they came there. And therefore Alaska is part and parcel of North America, even though the International Dateline bisects it, nevertheless, it's part of America. Because he also doesn't bisect land masses. And it's all determined by who got there first and started the first Shabbos. The reason for that is because there is a Radbaz who says that wherever a Jew, Radbaz is from the 16th century, says wherever the Jews get first, they determine the calendar in that location. Right? They bring the calendar with them wherever they go over the world. You think about it for a minute. It's a strange concept, but how do we know what day of the week it is anywhere? How do we know what day of the week it is in a newly settled area where people never lived before? So the Radbaz says they bring Shabbos with them. But it's interesting that there's a big problem in the Philippines, according to this, because the Philippines was one of the countries which was, before the International Dateline was established and determined, it was on one side. They assumed that they were on the east side of the dateline, the east side of the dateline, and then they were moved to the west side of the dateline. See, the Philippines over here? So they assumed that they were on this side, but then they moved to the other side. So the question is what happens to Shabbos, because they lost the day. When they went forward, they lost the day. So the question is what happens to Shabbos in the Philippines. I'm not sure what they do in the youngest of Manila. But another place, this is a big issue, is New Zealand. Because New Zealand, according to everybody, I shouldn't say according to it's not bisected by, it's not like Australia where it's bisected by the line. So therefore, again, according to Chazish, New Zealand, everybody's Mechal Shabbos every week.
Where's New Zealand?
New Zealand's the west of Australia. But it's over here. But Chazish's line is over here, and the International Dateline is over here. So it becomes the questionable area. So getting back to Hawaii. So Hawaii, according to Tukachinsky, is a problem. If you're in Hawaii, according to Tukachinsky, you should keep Shabbos on Friday. Because although it's on the west side, it's in the east side of the second International Dateline, which means it's, so to speak, a day before. It's on the east side of our national. It's on the east side of the International Dateline. It's on the west side of the Halachic International Dateline, which really means that it should be a day ahead. So therefore, the day which they call Friday should really be another negative Shabbos. So it's interesting. Rabbi Aaron Soloveitchik Paskin, and because actually he said to a Paskin, there's a question about it. When I asked him about this, he kind of like he wouldn't answer directly, but he said that he told businessmen who go to Hawaii that they should keep Shabbos on Friday, and Kiddush and Havdalah on Friday, and on Shabbos they should machmir on deraisos. Now, it's important to know if you're machmir just on deraisos and on rabbanans, so Shabbos will look totally different. There'll be so many things. You can go out and buy things on Shabbos, right? There's no problem carrying money. Don't need an eruv because there's no rishus harabim. You're allowed to make monetary transactions, right? Because there's no money is only this or muktzah.
You have to walk there.
What?
Or bicycle.
Who says you have to walk?
Bicycle.
Why could you take a bus?
Oh, bus.
Yeah. I'm telling you, Shabbos is totally different. You take a cab too. Shabbos is totally different if you only keep the rices. We have no concept of what Shabbos be if only the rices. So therefore he paskin that Ikar Mikra on Friday and that L'chumra on Shabbos. So if somebody asks me, so I once asked his son Rebbe Yosef Mitchell, asked him, what about the Kuzari? And he gave me this response, which was, we don't have to take the Kuzari into account, right? So therefore, and they have mashmos from the Ravid somewhere that seems to go like Rav Tukachinsky. Anyway, without getting to the details, I didn't see it in the Ravid myself. I mean, I saw the Ravid, I didn't see that the Ravid actually said what they say it says. But, so that's what he paskins. So when somebody asks me what to do when they go to Hawaii, I pass them to just keep Shabbos on Shabbos. When somebody asks to do Japan, I pass them to keep Shabbos on Sunday. And the Chumrah on what they call Shabbos. The Lubavitch.
So I asked a loaded question.
Yes, you did. Well, you got the answer,
I was
right?
wondering when you held. It's confusing. It's not clear what Aaron really held. You asked the two different sons. They say different things.
Right. So, yeah, he really didn't want to answer when I asked him.
But Rebbe Elio didn't want to
No,
answer.
Rabbanan.
Rabbanan didn't want to answer you.
Yeah.
He was still scared of Chaim Zimmerman.
I guess. So the Lubavitch has this problem because they have shluchim all over the world. And what do the shluchim do? So Lamaisa, the Rebbe has a fourth shita, I'm sorry. The Rebbe really goes with the shita of a Shuvah Sefer called the B'nai Tzion, which has to do with where we know that the sun and moon created on Wednesday in the 15th hour of the day, which is 9 o'clock in the morning, because it's starting the night before. 6 to 6 is 12 hours, and another 3 hours. And we know that Gan Eden was in Pakistan, more or less. So based on that, they have a whole cheshbon of where the International Dateline is, based on that assumption of where the sun was.
Sunrise was?
What?
Where the
Where the sun was when it was first created.
Where the first sunset was. That's a new day?
What? Where the sun was created at 9 o'clock, and it was in Pakistan. So the International Dateline is going to be.
How do you know the sun was over here, the sun was over there?
Because where was the sunset at that point in time? Wherever the sun was setting at that time was where the International Dateline was. So and it comes out very, very close to the second International Dateline. So the Rebbe never spoke about it explicitly, as far as I know, or at least he did speak about it once, but very unclear. He seems to incline towards the sheet of the Bnei Tzion, and take into account those are the Tzipes of Frank, and therefore they go de facto, at least by the second International Dateline. But the Rebbe was fascinated by the International Dateline, and he has this radical psak about Shavuos based on the Dateline. Very often the Chassidim on Yom Tov. That's used to always be. So what happens if you pass during Sfiras Omer over the International Dateline? Right? So if you pass from east to west, so you pass on let's say on day 37. That's the dateline. You're passing into day 38, and let's say you passed over broad daylight. So when do you count that night? Right? It's right now. You flew playing in a plane, and you passed the International Dateline. So you flew from 37 to 38. And now nighttime comes. What do you count? What would you say?
Why don't you just count during the day?
What?
Count during the
Fine.
day.
So you say you count 38 now.
Yeah.
And then tonight you count 39.
Yeah.
With a bracha, without a bracha.
38 without a bracha.
And 39 with a bracha.
Oh, you counted during the day?
Okay? What?
Yeah.
38 without a bracha. And what about the other way? Now you flew from 38 into 37. What do you do now?
You go around the world the other way.
Oh! Go ahead. So the Rebbe held that, not like you, he said you continue your own count. He said if you fly during 37, to that night you count 38. Even though, let's say you landed at...
Shavuos is later.
Right, so say you landed in Melbourne, and they're counting 39, you still count 38. So actually you're going to keep 3 days Shavuos, he says. You keep... Because since you're a day behind, you keep their 2 days of Shavuos,
Love to do that.
and then you keep their a third day of Shavuos, which is they according to your count of Sfira. Because he said Sfira Soma is given to every individual, so therefore you make your own Shavuos. And if you fly from Sydney or from Melbourne back to America to Crown Heights, then you're going to also keep an extra day of Shavuos, but starting a day earlier, because you're going to get there because according to your count. So if the Lubavitchers who fly between Crown Heights and Australia during Sfira, they fly the long way around to avoid the question. It's a much longer flight, but it's a long flight anyway. But they fly the other way around to avoid the Shiur. Now nobody else holds like that, because everybody holds that it's not your own count; it's the count of Klal Yisrael. But this is because this is machlekes. It's just an issue in Psak Halacha because it's machlekes and Svaros, which originated in the 20th century. How do you know? There's no way to know how to paskin these things. It's all basically a chush, a sense of which way things should incline. There are no definite rayas about it. It's all svaras. Now, for example, it's another issue. Let's say you pass the International Dateline after you daven mincha, right? But now it's new. But now it's the next day. Do you daven mincha again? Do you see that question?
Go around the other way.
Right. Yes. So I believe, if I recall correctly, it's from memory, that Reb Hershel Schachter holds you a daven a second time, and I don't think that's correct. I don't think, again, it's all svara, but according to, it's an issue for women who's counting shiva nekiyim during nida. So, but most poskim hold that there's a difference between the date and a day. In other words, the day still remains a 24-hour day based on your own 24-hour day from sunset to sunset. The date might change as based on the International Dateline, meaning the day of the week and the date on the calendar, but the halachic day remains a halachic day. And therefore, if you daven the ready mincha, when daven mincha day.
24 hours?
From sunset to sunset, right? You daven ready, whatever you daven ready, you don't daven again, right? Kind of now, of course, if you fly into Shabbos or out of Shabbos, then you have to. Well, I don't know. If you fly into Shabbos, you have to keep Shabbos whatever time is left. And also, once you begin Shabbos, you can't fly out of Shabbos. Once a person is Makabel Shabbos, we know this from the Gemara. Says if you're lost in the desert, you count, and you've lost track of time, you count 6 or 7 days to keep Shabbos. Once you start once you Makabel Shabbos, it becomes Shabbos for you, and therefore you can't actually stop in the middle and say, okay, now Shabbos is
you
over.
Find out and you kept Shabbos on Wednesday.
They have to keep it another day.
When you get,
it's not true. The sign is not true.
Yeah, I think I remember.
Yeah.
Find the right place.
Upstairs.
when you go to civilization again, right? And you kept it on Wednesday always. You just get rid of it, or you count 7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, rid of it. So I know of a case where somebody flew. I heard of a case. I say somebody flew from Japan to Seattle the day after Yom Kippur and landed on Yom Kippur. So then you have to, he could eat until he landed. He could eat until he passed the dateline. Once he landed, of course, he was in Yom Kippur because he always gave chumrei makom sheyatza misham, chumrei makom shebal l'sham. You have to give the chumras of both days. So therefore, you have to give the chumras of both days. So so basically, we have, just to sum up, we have the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah makes sense according to Kuzari. It's the smooth, most glop shot in the Gemara, because then we understand what a molad zaken is, right? And why molad zaken is a problem, because of when the new moon has to be seen somewhere on Earth, and we understand also that it can be 18 hours for us and 6 hours for them, because it all depends on, it always gets confusing even to me at this point, but it all depends on where it's light and where it's dark, at what time the molad occurs, and there's going to be a 12-hour discrepancy between us and them based on the 18-hour difference. There's going to be a 12-hour discrepancy in who sees the moon for 6 hours before the new molad, because that's the last time you can possibly see it to the naked eye, and who sees it and they see it therefore again only 18 hours later, and vice versa, again because the 9-day factor, and vice versa, who sees the 18 hours, 18 and 6. And again, the 12-hour discrepancy has to do with, because night and day come in the middle, and this is where I get very confused, because you have to visualize many things at once, and it's not hard for me to do. So we're going to leave, but the Gemara itself makes sense best according to the Kuzari, and that's why, again, the Chazon Ish said that the Kuzari seems to be the way to go, if that's the way the Gemara makes sense. There, as I said, there are other shittas, right? We mentioned Rav Tukachinsky. We mentioned Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank. We mentioned the Bnei Tzion, which seems to be the shitta of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. There is one opinion which above some, not a source which was never accepted, that the International Dateline runs between Bavel and Eretz Yisrael. But, because it says Holan v'Holahu. So that if you take it literally, that usually means Bavel and Eretz Yisrael. There's Rabbi Sternbach Shita, which is absurd, but I'll tell it to you anyway. He says that just like we have hemispheres up east and west, we have hemispheres north and south. And he says Yerushalayim is in the northern hemisphere. So, and there, the Kuzari wrote about Yerushalayim. And therefore, northern hemisphere, the international dateline is 90 degrees east of Yerushalayim. But in the southern hemisphere, where Yerushalayim, there is no Yerushalayim, this wasn't relevant. And therefore, in the southern hemisphere, we can make the international dateline, according to our svara, which would be to make Yerushalayim the middle of the entire world, 180 degrees east of Yerushalayim. So Rabbi Sternbach has the international dateline going down 90 degrees, out 90 degrees, and then down again 90 degrees, which is very convenient. Because Australia is in the southern hemisphere, New Zealand is in the southern hemisphere, and therefore they're all going to be, and Hawaii is in the northern hemisphere, and therefore everything is going to work out halachically. It's an absurd svara, but that's what he says, but he wants to pass on halacha. Anyway, this is obviously just a very condensed overview of the sugya, but hopefully it will give you an interest in pursuing it someday further. Okay? Shkoyach. Thank you for listening.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, it's like a shiur. I had to hear about it.
I understand.
That was being recorded?
I recorded, yeah.
Oh, okay. I hope I didn't interrupt.
No, it's good.
I never kind of zoomed in there as a straw. You is, no, I told you guys the whole story with Chaim Zimmerman and shiur. It's like a half-hour-long story. I met him.
Should I record this?
No. But some of it's famous. But
Yeah.
I have an uncle, Yosef Mendelssohn, who's a Talmud of Chaim Zimmerman. And he's a wacko. He was in prison, different things he did for Chaim.
Okay.
So I went to meet him in Eretz Yisrael, and he was kept under lock and key because people would attack him physically because of all these things that he wrote, just being mevazeh all the gedolim, and he was an interesting person. So I was told to go to his house and ring the bell. They'd ask who's there. Just say Mendelssohn, because Mendelssohn has clearance. And by the time they realized that Mendelssohn's already inside, my uncle would get to the door and get me in. So I got in. He's playing a chess game against one of his talmidim, and he wasn't so good. He lost the game. But I asked him, how should I refer to Rabbi Zimmerman? Shiva the Rav, Hagon. Hagon, Chaim Zimmerman, just call me Hagon. I was talking to him, calling him Hagon. I asked him all sorts of questions. He asked me who do I learn by. So I told him that I learned by Rav Aaron Soloveitchik. Oh, let me tell you. See, he said that he told me some of his mice in Skokie. The minute he goes to fire Rosh Shivas there, it seems.
You know the famous story.
Well, the one with Aleinu and
Yeah.
Mamzer. So that's what I told this in shiur.
No, the shiur.
I told it in shul just a few days ago also. Yeah, he told me it's true. He really said it.
Right.
And I can, he said it. I asked a great niece of his I went out with who also told me, yeah, it really happened. It's a true story.
Some people were there, right?
There were people.
Yeah, I thought.
He said he became Rosh Hashiva of Skokie when he was 16 years old. He had taken a b'china of Herzog, came to America, wanted to invite him for a meal Friday night. He was a nephew of Baruch there. He was a big genius, and he said, "I'll come to you if you give me smicha." But on the smicha, it has to say that I know Bavli, Yushalmi, Be'iyun, and all Arbechel B'Shulchan Aruch. You have to test me. If it's true, you write this, I'll come eat by you. He said, "See, he tested me, and he saw it was true." And then he came. So he said he was hired at 16. When he was 26, he was fired. It's like most of us are first thinking of getting a job, and he was already fired from his first job. But so he said years after that, so Rav Aaron came to see him, and it was announced, Hagon Rav Aaron Soloveitchik is here to see you. He told me this story. So Rav Aaron came in, and Rabbi Zimmerman said, "Since when did you become a Gon?" He said Rav Aaron looked a little embarrassed. But then, years later, Rav Aaron came to visit him, whatever it was. Hagon Rav Aaron Soloveitchik's here to see you. So he asked him again, 10 years later, "Since when did you become a Gon?" He said, "I saw that time Rav Aaron wasn't as embarrassed. I knew the Shurin family had convinced him that he was a Gon." So that was his way of getting my whole family, his wife's family. He was so funny. When I came back to America, I told Rav Aaron I met Rav Chaim Zimmerman. He said, "Oh, what did he say?" I said, "I can't tell you." It was just too. He said, "No, tell me, tell." I said, "Rebbe, it might be Lashon Hara." He took my hand and said, "Tell me." Tell me, a big smile on his face. He just wanted to hear. Then he told me that they were chavrusas in MTA. He and Rav Chaim Zimmerman. And Rav Chaim Zimmerman said, "I was his chavrusa because his father made me to be his chavrusa." Arla, he didn't know. So Rav Aaron told me they argued all the time. They were just arguing. They were arguing about some ritva and basra. They were always arguing. Rav Aaron Kotler came and gave it a shiur in Lamport Auditorium in 1931. Rav Aaron Soloveitchik told me, "Don't anyone ever tell you that Rav Aaron never came into the building." It's true later. 40s, 50s, he didn't come in. But in 1931, he was shiur in Lamport. Rav Aaron said, "I was there. Rav Chaim Zimmerman was 12 years old. He got up on top of one of the chairs in Lamport and started screaming at Rav Aaron in the middle of the shiur. And they were fighting. He says he was in Yilui, and they were fighting until Rav Aaron told him to shut up, sit down, or leave. So Rav Aaron Kotler said that to Rav Chaim Zimmerman. So Rav Aaron Soloveitchik, he loved this. He said, "Yeah," he yelled at him, he screamed at him. So apparently there was a lot of animosity over the years. So I'm not surprised if they had machlokas about the dateline also. Years ago, and I read some of his stuff just to read it. Is
One of his famous lines when he gave a shiur in Eretz Yisrael, he went to ask for Rabbi Ruderman if he liked the shiur. But he didn't say it was good shiur. He said it's good you like it because Shkub, Trump, and Wasserman also liked it.
I asked him about understanding Baruch Hashem. It was so hard to understand. So he said, "Well, my uncle, he wasn't much of a writer. So he had an idea. He didn't know what to write. So he just wrote anything." So I said, "But how does Hagon feel that he's able to understand what's written there?" He said, "The rest of the world are all a bunch of babies. They don't know. I can understand what my uncle meant." "How long were you in your uncle's shiur?" 3 months. "How old were you?" 13 when I was in the shiur. "And you're the only one who could understand it?" "Yeah, everyone else, a bunch of babies. They couldn't understand it." It was like one insult after the other. And then I asked him about playing chess. I said, "Are there any Rosh Hashivas who play?" He said, "Banish was pretty good for a yeshiva bacher." Banish Finkel. It was just listening to it was just so funny. When he passed away, so Rabbi Simon told me, "No one in the yeshiva knows who he is. You say it has." So on a Thursday night, like 2 in the morning, I said over all these stories, I gave a hesped. He was just, After I said all that, that's when I say in shiur about Aleinu, Asher Yotzar, and the Mamzer came to Kodesh Baruch Hu, all complaining.
Oh yeah.
Remember now? So I try to talk about it, then I get into that last joke. Reb Chaim Zimmerman.
And he once got up, one of the reasons he was fired, he once got up at a Moab Malka and Sophie and said, I actually, my film was your present. He said, I'm so happy the whole faculty is here, even my friend the Apikoros Berkowitz. And Berkowitz got up and said, "You swine," and threw a plate at him. Those were the days.
But what was your position in Skokie? You were officially the Rosh Hashiva, or you were
No.
base manager?
Base manager. I wasn't base manager either.
Who was the Rosh Hashiva when you were there?
This guy it was early, Morgenstern.
You
Or we would know him. He was there for longer than most Rosh Hashiva because he was not in.
Aha, that's it too.
Yes.
But the Brown Spiegel was Rosh Hashiva there for exactly 0 days. Apparently, he was, after the Baron was fighting,
Yeah.
so they asked the Brown Spiegel to take the shiur, to become Rosh Hashiva.
He was living in Chicago.
He flew to Chicago.
Yeah.
His family hadn't moved yet. He flew to Chicago. He slept there one night, and that night he got phone calls of death threats. So he never came in the first day to give shiur. He flew back to New York, and it was one of those years, Rabbi Chaim Bronstein told me, it was one of those years that they didn't have an Elzman in yeshiva. Yeshiva started after Sukkot. So he had not missed any shiurim officially in YU, and in those days, no one gave shiur when there was no shiur officially. So he really didn't miss anything yet. So Rabbi Bronstein said he came hat in hand, begging Rabbi Chalab and Dr. Belkin, I guess it was, for his job back. And they gave it back to him because he never really left. He got death threats.
Yeah, it was a bitter time which still has repercussions to this day.
I mean, the firing of
Chicago
Revine.
never recovered.
Who never recovered?
Chicago.
From Revine being fired. And it was that bad. He never told me what it was all about. All he said was there was one person, one phone call, and 10 years later that phone call gave him a story. The chairman of, who was the chairman?
It wasn't their chairman. There was no chairman at the time. The vice president.
Chris. I remember people told me in the family, they said everyone tried telling Revire not to go to Chicago, but he felt he had no choice. His brother was so big that he really couldn't be his own person, and he needed that apparently. So went to Chicago, and he had a lot of tzaras from it. So I can't tell you what happened. After he was fired 2 years later, his building burned down, and
I thought
less than 10 years after that, he had a stroke. It was
people on the other side of Mount Lakers also did not do so well.
Who?
People on the other side of Mount Lakers.
Yeah. Revine was very popular in Chaim Berlin. Someone told me, called David, they all learned by him. He said he was very popular.
Yeah, why do you live Chaim Berlin?
Well, he got into a fight with Victor Miller.
So I think Miller was also fired at some point.
Right. And Revine had Rav Hutner backing him. Rav Hutner was the one who brought him in. But apparently, it definitely had something to do with when Rav Hutner was leaving Teretz Yisrael. Rav Shechter was trying to maintain some sort of control. That's when he started firing all the faculty that had more of a personality than him. In the early 70s. So Victor Miller went to Chicago.
He wasn't YU before he went to Chicago?
He was in YU before also. He was in YU and Chaim Berlin at the same time.
At the same time,
He
yeah.
took the subway back and forth. That was, grandmother used to say, he used to go with a suitcase of sperm on the train, and Ryan told me that he used to spread the sperm out on the seats. Apparently he held like a brisker, you could put them anywhere, put them on the floor, and he spread them out, and he would always miss his stop when he got to Brooklyn. So he gave the shir gave him 1 gave him 9 in the morning. Then he got on the train to Brooklyn.
First Salvation told me that his father, Rebar, once was sitting at the hospital where Rebar Shechter got married. And
But if Aaron Shechter
he got married, yeah. And that The minimum din Chaim Lin was that, like, I guess most will see this, like the person wears the Shiva shirt. You know that?
Never heard of such a thing.
The Hasidim most, I think it's by most Hasidim. The cousin wears the Rebbe shirt. So also under Chaim Lin. So it says at one time, the Rebbe Shepard to come to the chuppah. So Shepard turns to the Rebbe and says, "This fellow is also putting out."
The older, the shirt of Chaim Berlin.
Yeah. He said Yiddish, but he said Yiddish.
Please, I don't know Yiddish.
This fellow is also putting on his underwear.
The stories I hear about the Rav was a tough cookie. Aaron was always so nice. So clean. I knew him only after the stroke, but he definitely knew how to scream. He was so nice to people. All right, barbecue.
Yeah?
Around when I was there, Byron made a big mistake. When he didn't come out, when I was in Chicago, when he didn't come out against the Skokie Eruv.
When he did come out against
Not.
he did not.
He did not. And I think because, I'm sure because he was friends with the Irish one.
There was one rabbi, that's not the name, it was Ritz Gold, his father was one of the rabbis, who was behind the West Rogers parking. Is that the same as the Skokie
No.
Eruv?
That's why the parking was actually kosher.
The West Rogers parking was kosher.
Yeah.
But the Aaron didn't like it.
I know, but you lose credibility if you don't come out against the postulator.
I hear what you're saying.
They never check the Eruv, it's
That's terrible. So what was this rabbi's name? Started with a W? I don't think he was one of the big. Hey, he had a frock and everything. But there was a rabbi in Chicago. His name was with a W. Walmart, not Walmart. Well, there's a Walmart in Muncie still. He's out of prison. So
He wasn't true.
what was his name? I forgot his name. I think he started with a W. He was a Rav in Chicago. When he was part of the West Rogers Park Eruv, and I came to Chicago.
Was there?
It was.
Rabbi was there?
I don't think so. I would remember.
Whoa, somebody lived in Chicago? That called which one? Is that called Robert and Wayne McCaffrey? It wasn't good.
I don't know. There was a rabbi in Chicago who held the Eruv. He wore a frock. I met him at a wedding. I took a fair. I was supposed to go out with his daughter. His daughter did not want to go out with me. I didn't know that because she didn't really want to marry a guy who was planning on being in chinuch. But that wasn't told me by the Krupniks who set it up. So I took this fair, and it was great. The fair went very nicely, and I was speaking about it, we were having a great time. Not a Rosh Yeshiva, he was a Rav. And I think when he started with W. I don't know. So I can't remember. Ended up, I never went out with his daughter. So I asked Rav Aaron, am I allowed to go out with this girl? Her father holds of the Eruv. So he said, just because her father is a Mrs. Mediach does not puzzle the girl.
No, fights gave them sanctions there. Not that I hold the Red David, but he gave them sanctions there in West Rogers Park.
While Rav Aaron was there?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Is there such a thing as a din of Bar Asra? Was he bigger than any of the other Talmud Chacham in Chicago at the time? Rav Aaron Soloveitchik.
He tells you to put down the Master there because of the bar.
They were not Master there because Rav Aaron held it in. But I'm saying, was he considered in Chicago at the time the biggest Talmud Chacham there? Was he there, or other people didn't know him?
He was Brisker, so what's the master? They had their own orbit. He's not,
We better go, otherwise they can eat over food. What?
Most of the freshmen didn't come.
So you think there's a lot of food?
I guarantee nobody from my share came, so.
Do you need help packing up?
No, I'm fine.
No? Okay. I'll come back after and get everything. Right now, I'm leaving in an hour, so I'm gonna go eat.
What did you come for?
What's that? What did I come for? The same thing happens every year. I'm supposed to monitor the volleyball game, and it never happens. So usually I stay in here, and then the Talmidim wander in, wander out. I say hi. Then I have a hamburger. And then that's what we do here.
I think attendance is much lower this year than it usually is.